You're not overthinking. Your brain is doing exactly what it learned to do, and it thinks it's saving your life. It turns out the loop you can't stop, the same thought, cycling for the fourth hour in a row, the mental replay of a conversation that ended 3 weeks ago. None of that is a malfunction. It is a system running correctly. A system that was designed for a world that no longer exists, pointed at problems it was never built to solve. And the most unsettling part? The harder you think about it, the worse it gets. So what exactly is your brain trying to do, and why won't it let you stop? May is not disorganized. She is not falling apart. If you watched her from across the room, you would see someone working. And that is exactly what it feels like from the inside. When you can't stop thinking about something, a decision you haven't made, a mistake you can't take back, a conversation you're not sure you understood correctly, the thinking feels productive. It feels like effort applied to a real problem. Like if you just turn the question over one more time at the right angle, the answer will surface. This is the first thing most people believe about overthinking, that it is a form of carefulness, that it is what responsible, self-aware people do, that the alternative, not thinking about it, is laziness or avoidance. And to be fair, that belief is not entirely wrong. Careful thinking is real. Reflection is genuinely useful. The ability to sit with a problem, examine it from multiple angles, anticipate consequences, that is not a flaw. In the right context, it is a skill. The problem is not the thinking. The problem is what happens when that skill gets applied to a category of problems it cannot solve. A memory, a feeling, a fear that has no specific answer attached to it. And May knows this. Somewhere below the level of words, she knows the page isn't helping her. But she keeps writing. Because stopping feels worse. But this is only the beginning of what's actually happening. Watch what happens here. The athlete is mid-performance. Everything is working. Then, for 1 second, they become aware. Not distracted, aware. They notice their grip pressure, the angle of their elbow, the exact moment their weight shifts. They are thinking about the movement instead of just doing it. The coordination collapses. Not because they forgot how, not because they aren't trying hard enough, but because they are trying too hard, in exactly the wrong way. The conscious mind stepped into a process that worked precisely because it was running below conscious thought. And the moment the analytical brain tried to supervise it, the automated skill fell apart. This is paralysis by analysis. The moment conscious attention enters a process that was already working, it does not improve that process. It interrupts it. Now bring that same mechanism back to May's notebook. The feeling she is trying to think her way through is not a logic puzzle. It doesn't have a correct answer on the other side of the next question. But her analytical mind, the same one that writes careful notes, builds frameworks, finds the flaw in other people's reasoning, doesn't know how to do nothing with discomfort. So it does the only thing it knows how to do. It analyzes. Now look at Mark. Same root mechanism, different exit, where May responds to discomfort by pulling it apart until she understands it. Mark responds by making sure he never has to look directly at it. Different behavior, same avoidance. He is not solving the problem either. He is just paying a different price for not solving it. Both of them are running from something they haven't named yet. But here is what makes May's version particularly strange. The brain isn't even scanning for the right threats anymore. What started as a survival mechanism, The ability to detect danger early, to rehearse bad outcomes before they happen, to stay alert, got repurposed. The world changed, but the tool didn't. There are no predators in the coffee shop. The danger is abstract, a relationship, a decision, a version of herself she is afraid of becoming. The brain cannot tell the difference, so it runs the threat detection loop anyway, burning through mental energy, producing the sensation of progress without any actual movement. The brain has a name for this: the illusion of control. The more you think, the more it feels like you're approaching a solution, but the thinking itself becomes the loop. But the loop does something else too, something that is harder to see precisely because you're inside it. In the 1990s, researchers ran an experiment where participants were asked to count how many times a group of players passed a basketball. They counted carefully. Most of them got the number right. Almost none of them noticed the person in a gorilla suit who walked directly through the middle of the scene, stopped, beat their chest, and walked away. They were looking too hard at the thing they were told to look for. The gorilla walks right through the frame, and May never looks up from counting. The brain locked so completely onto one task that it stopped letting anything else in. That is inattentional blindness, not a failure of attention, an extreme success of it. She has been counting passes for years, except this is also not the full picture. Everything described so far, the evolutionary mismatch, the illusion of control, the analytical skill turning against itself, still assumes that the overthinking is something May is doing. A habit, a tendency, a pattern she could interrupt if she just knew how. But here is where it gets harder. The brain is not a static object. It is a structure that physically changes in response to what it repeatedly does. When a thought pattern runs consistently, the same worry, the same loop, the same replay of a specific memory, the neural connections that support that pattern grow stronger, more efficient. The brain, trying to be helpful, optimizes for whatever you give it the most practice at. After years of persistent rumination, the connections between the brain's logical processing centers and its emotional distress signals don't just strengthen. They become the default architecture. The brain stops treating overthinking as a response to a problem. It treats overthinking as the baseline state, the resting position. This is the part that is difficult to say without it sounding hopeless, so let's say it plainly. At a certain point, the overthinking is no longer a choice May is making. It is a structure her brain has built. Not because she failed, but because she practiced. There is also this. When May replays a memory she can't stop thinking about, she is not remembering the event accurately. The brain doesn't store memories like video files, it reconstructs them. And in that reconstruction, it uses a specific and extremely biased editing process. It amplifies the most intense negative moment and the final impression before the memory closed. Everything in between, the context, the nuance, the parts that might complicate the picture, gets compressed or dropped entirely. Which means the version of events that May is analyzing over and over is not what happened. It is the worst possible cut of what happened. She has been writing a devastating critical essay about a film she has never actually seen. And the more she writes, the more detailed and convincing the essay becomes. Does this mean you are just addicted to the illusion of control, running on a mental treadmill that exhausts your brain without ever bringing you closer to an actual solution? Sit with that for a moment. Because if the thinking was never going to get you there, If the loop was always the problem, dressed as the solution, then a significant portion of what you experience as effort, as self-awareness, as being the kind of person who takes things seriously, was the brain burning its own fuel to stay in place. Here is the honest version of where that leaves you. Not fixed, not outside the problem, still inside it, but standing in a slightly different place within it, which turns out to matter more than it sounds. The brain can be rewired. The same neuroplasticity that built the rumination loop can build different pathways. But that process doesn't begin with insight or the correct analytical framework. May doesn't close the notebook because she figured out the right technique. She closes it because this time, she just didn't follow the thought. That's all that happened. No system, no method. One moment where the loop started and she didn't go with it. Not resolution, just a different direction, once. This is not the moment May figures it out. She will probably open the notebook again in 20 minutes. The thought she was turning over will resurface on the bus home, in the shower, at 2 a.m., when the room is dark and quiet, and her brain decides that right now is an excellent time to revisit everything she has ever done wrong. But for this moment, just this one, she didn't follow it. You are not the thoughts your brain produces, but you are not separate from them either. You are the one who decides, each time, imperfectly, without a guarantee, whether to follow them down. The brain learned to overthink because at some point, thinking felt like safety. That is not a character flaw, that is an adaptation. The question is whether the adaptation still fits the life you are actually living. If your brain learned to overthink as a way to feel safe, what would it mean to feel safe without it?